Sorry guys, no video today. I just can't be bothered, you know? Being a YouTuber is so hard.
Wait.
It's difficult to overstate just how important Souls was at the time. Even though it's been overanalyzed to death in the years since, what the Souls formula did and the breath of fresh air that actual difficulty represented in the industry was borderline impossible to measure. Prior to this, action combat and the streamlining of mechanics and overall depth from the console boom at the turn of the millennium had begun to homogenize design principles. Of course, then comes Modern Warfare or Halo with regenerating health, cinematic cutscenes and so forth, deliberately removing any friction from the experience. It's not hard to see why many people started to miss the ball-breaking difficulty of old school games, weird esoteric experiments, and above all, studios taking creative risks. It's arguably become worse in the age of live service shit and everything needing a multiplayer mode and battle pass nowadays, but it's not all bad. Soulsborne is one of those exceptions. I guess to touch on my history with the series quickly, I was actually a bit of a latecomer to the scene. Technically, my first experience with FromSoft was that terrible PC port of Dark Souls 1 Prepare to Die edition back in 2014. But that doesn't count, because I played it for about 10 minutes, realized it was impossible with keyboard controls, since I didn't have a controller at the time, and then dropped it before I even opened the Asylum doors. It was Bloodborne in 2017 that really brought me into the fold. Much like the power progression within the games themselves, the feeling when it clicks in a Souls game and you've mastered its systems is second to none. Attack commitment, the razor-precise hitboxes, and iframe dance is unlike anything else when you hit that flow state of a good boss fight or slogging through to the next bonfire. The problem is, like everything, this formula would eventually hit its limit. Elden Ring, as much as I loved it, was that moment. For better or worse, Dark Souls became synonymous with difficulty. Bandai Namco obviously knew this from the get-go, given the marketing they were pushing about how masochistic the game supposedly was, but it was inevitable, whether Miyazaki and the rest of the team had planned it to be or not. The whole point, and really the beauty of Soulsborne, is that you are overcoming a challenge and that your character's story is shaped by emergent narrative in how you approach and interact with its systems. Do you total up and use a shield? Do you go hitless? A naked lunatic with a giant hammer jumping around the place like a chipmunk on crack? Parry people so hard they go back into their mother's womb? I have a lot of love for Dark Souls 1 in particular because it feels like the combat has the most intentionality to it. That's a weird way to describe it, but the weight of everything you do when compared to the fast, slick action of the later games makes it feel better in a sense. Artorias was a big deal at the time because the boss represented a departure from an otherwise slow, methodical style of playing. Once where you could certainly dodge, but at the same time also parry, hit trade, block with a conventional shield, or spam magic from afar. Manus, on the other hand, feels like a Dark Souls 3, even Elden Ring boss, put in a game really not designed for it, and he kicked the bejesus out of people not prepared for him, myself included. The problem is that as soon as Dark Souls 1 was released, FromSoft had really nowhere else to go. The games had to raise the bar in difficulty, else the entire point would be lost, and thus they had to go faster. Dark Souls 2 is an interesting case study in how it tried to experiment with changing, but also regressing mechanically and in terms of balance. The healing gems are a great example. I am not a diehard like these games so often attracts, and I appreciate all the games for different reasons, but the changes from Dark Souls 1 to 3 is like night and day. To clarify, I'm not trying to say that any game is objectively better or worse than any other. I'm talking about the identity shift and mechanical or skill ceiling that needed to be raised. There was no other choice. As soon as players mastered one game's systems, the subsequent ones had to adapt. Longer combos, faster attack speeds, tighter iframes. Delayed attacks are now insane. It's like that scene in Spinal Tap where the amp goes up to 11. If Miyazaki or another director had released a game, let's say Dark Souls 2, like it apparently was for many players, that stayed around the same skill level, then the experienced players that form the core audience of FromSoft's community would complain. Bloodborne is unique in the sense that it kinda inverted the Souls formula. Cautious, deliberate play was replaced with fast, ruthless aggression, and that deadly dance is why I love the game so much. Clearly FromSoft had a sense of humour putting that crappy shield in early on. As its own self-contained thing, I think Bloodborne is probably my favourite of the series, which is ironic because my least favourite type of From Software boss is the flailing, wild animal that's impossible to read and messes up the camera. It's for this reason that I miss the slow, methodical gameplay of Dark Souls 1. If we were to compare it to Elden Ring, dodge rolling has become almost a necessity because of how fast and overtuned bosses are. I'm not a diehard, I'm not going to list off iframe counts, and I don't mind hit trading because I'm really not a pro. There are countless other channels that have delved into more of the stats if you want to learn more about that kind of thing. The sad but inevitable shift in From's design philosophy is that they had to get faster, combos and movement wilder. The success of Elden Ring was partly due to the fact it was open world and introduced the casuals to the Souls experience, and in that way, it's fascinating to see how some of these people who have since gone back and played the older games bounce off them for one reason or another. The open world was as much a detriment to Elden Ring as its core appeal though, because even at the time, I hated how Sights of Grace are everywhere now. You can heal up at any time and a large chunk of the Souls appeal is gone because you don't have to worry about the run back or the healing economy outside of bosses. Quick aside, I like Sekiro, but never finished it because it felt like it demanded the twitchy reaction time that I've said before I just don't have. That's why I don't play competitive shooters or fighting games or character action games. To be clear, I still respect it as a game, it's just not my thing. Anyway, my worry after Elden Ring is that From Software is going to coast on this success, and much like BioWare or Arcane Studios before them, this is going to lead to a downwards trajectory in the quality and design of their games. Duskblood, or whatever it's called, that Switch exclusive, seems like it's more of the same, almost cruel in how similar it is to the Bloodborne license that Sony has a nice tight grip on. Apparently, they're also making a magic-focused game, which sounds nice, but I've said before, magic in most RPGs, especially Souls, doesn't appeal to me at all. Sekiro was the game for fast dex players who loved learning combos and dancing on a knife's edge with bosses. What I would love to see from Tackle though is a return to the commitment of slower Dark Souls 1 combat. Remind players that the meta isn't all about dodge rolling or parries if you're really good at it, but strength and hitting both heavy and hard can be just as fun. If we compare Ornstein and Smo to Consort Radahn, it's clear that the Souls formula has been stretched to its absolute breaking point. Maybe it's just me, but it's exhausting. Bosses are no longer challenges to overcome, but overtuned time sinks that often feel like you're beating your head against the wall. The first reaction to this, of course, is that I just need to get good, and that I'm just some normie or tourist that doesn't deserve to play the high art these games represent. If that's what you feel, then congratulations on your tunnel vision and your inability to take criticism. It's not like I hate Elden Ring specifically either. I remember I literally cheered when I finally beat Pre-Patch Radahn at the festival, or the wonder of taking the elevator down into the Sioppa River for the first time. Elden Ring is a beautiful game, but it's just too much. Shadow of the Erdtree went even further. Honestly, what I really want is FromSoft to make a Berserk game. Imagine playing as Guts, with or without the armor, and an entire system revolving around the destruction that the Dragonslayer Greatsword could wreak. Rage as a mechanical incentive to reward good play and hitting enemies effectively. Come on guys, let's make Godot proud. The art team would have a field day with this. It could be set within canon, or side stories within the Black Swordsman arc where he's facing off against one apostle after another, so Miyazaki doesn't feel like he's stepping on Mira's work, or they have to work around having major party members like Casca, Isidro, or even Puck. If you have even a passing knowledge of the Soulsborne games, it's clear that Miyazaki has a lot of love for the series, so really this is a perfect match. Someone give FromSoft the Berserk license already. Please, I'm begging you. Anyway, fingers crossed this doesn't make the From FromSoft community blow up at me, I get a slew of the same get good comments or whatever, because like I said, I really do love these games. I put hundreds of hours into just Elden Ring, and earlier this year, capped off an 8-year journey with Bloodborne by getting the Platinum Trophy. Like many people have spoken about the past few years though, I do miss that initial phase, when you're just getting into Souls for the first time, and everything felt so lethal. I would love to go back to a time where I didn't know Dark Souls 1 like the back of my hand, but that is hardly FromSoft's fault. We're here because they made some amazing games. Ultimately, what I hope for is that they continue to innovate in the way they once did, and don't just sit on their laurels. Seriously though, think of how cool that Berserk game would be. No pressure. I know, baby. I know, I don't want to fight Sif either.